When we're describing things or people using adjectives, there are often those confusing endings that seem to occur pretty much at random. This is one of the things that learners have the most trouble with. If something's big, for example, the adjective might be just groß. But then there are all kinds of variations of this word, like große, großes, großer, or even großen. And there's probably a whole lot of other forms too. Now, do you know what's going on? Well, after this video, you will. And even if you think you know, hang around because we've got a little quiz coming up. Grüß Gott, hallo, ich bin Billy Berger und das ist Bausteine 1. Herzlich willkommen. So what is going on? Well, we know that adjectives are useful because they help us describe nouns, whether we're talking about people, places, or things. Your first job is to decide how you want to use the adjective because, like in English, there are two ways to do this. You can either say, that tree is big, or that's a big tree. Now, there are some fancy words that we could use to describe what kind of adjectives they are, but I think it's just easier to look at what's going on. In the first example, the adjective's over on the other side of the verb. The tree is big. And in the other example, the adjective is tucked in nicely in front of the noun. We do the same thing in German, and the first way is the easy way, and the other way with the verb in front of the noun is, well, it's just a little bit trickier. Let's get the easy way sorted first. You can use these predicate adjectives just as you'll find them in the dictionary. So we can say, das Auto ist alt. Der Hafen ist bunt. Das Regal ist voll. Die Brücke ist lang. Der Mann ist müde. And so on. And none of that is difficult. If we want to use an adjective like this, we can look up the adjective in the dictionary and use it without doing anything else. It's just when we get to the other kind that we need to be careful because there's a rule, and an important one. If we're using an adjective before a noun, then there's got to be an ending on it. That means you'll never have a sentence like this. Das ist ein Altauto. Never. This even sounds terrible. Okay, so what do we do? Well, there are three things that we need to bear in mind, which I'll admit sounds like a lot, but it's pretty easy, especially if you've been following along with us the last couple of weeks. Here's what we need to know. First up, of course, there's the gender of the noun we're describing, and then we need to know whether this noun is the subject or the object, and we need to think about whether we're using definite articles, so all those der, die, das words, or the indefinite article, so maybe ein or eine. Well, let's assume you've been learning your vocab properly and you know the genders. Let's just use for now the definite article and we'll see how easy it really is. Let's start off with these examples. First though, without an adjective. Das ist der Hafen. Das ist das Hotel. Das ist die Post. Das ist die Uni. Now, let's add in some adjectives, remembering that there has to be an ending. Here's what we get. Das ist der große Hafen. Das ist das neue Hotel. Das ist die alte Post. Das ist die neue Uni. Well, what did we do? Well, you can see for yourself. All we are doing is adding on a little E onto the end of the adjective. There's nothing else to do. All these examples are in the nominative case, the subject case, and we're using a definite article, so we just need to add an E onto the adjective. But what happens if we're using the accusative case? Well, it's actually not much different. You'll remember that instead of der, die, das, we use den, die, das. And if you don't, then check out last week's video. The only one that is different here is, of course, the masculine. So the same thing happens with our adjectives, but just the masculine will be different. Let's have a look. Ich mag die neue Uni. still just got that E on the end. Ich mag die alte Post, again, just that E. Ich mag das neue Hotel, still the same. And ich mag den großen Hafen. You can see that this is the only one that's different. And looking carefully, you'll see the ending on the adjective is exactly the same as the ending on the article, den großen Hafen. And it's an ending, but kind of makes sense, doesn't it? This just leaves us with our indefinite articles. If we're using these, then we could have sentences like these ones. Again, first of all, without an adjective. We'll start with the nominative here. Das ist ein Briefkasten. Das ist ein Garten. Das ist eine Hecke. Das ist ein Tor. Here, we'll see that we're only using two articles, ein and eine. So the only thing that we know for certain is that the hedge, die Hecke, is feminine. There's nothing here that indicates whether the letterbox, the garden, or the gate are masculine or neuter. We only know they're not feminine. Well, that's until we start using adjectives. Watch what happens. Das ist ein schwarzer Briefkasten. Das ist ein kleiner Garten. Das ist eine hohe Hecke. Das ist ein altes Tor. And if we check out the endings that I'm using here, we can see quite easily the gender of each of the nouns. There's a nice ER whenever the noun is masculine, which makes sense because it's the same ER that we have in the definite article der, isn't it? And similarly, there's an E if it's feminine and an ES if it's neuter. And even if these things are the object of my sentence, so the direct object, then only one of the adjective endings is going to be any different. And if you remember which article is different in the accusative, I'll bet you can guess which one it is. So, quiz time. Let's see if you can work out what the adjective endings should be. We'll use the same adjectives. You just need to supply the right ending. Remember that now in the accusative case, you can look at the indefinite articles to tell you the gender of the noun. Einen is masculine, eine is feminine, and ein is neuter. Here we go. Los geht's. Ich sehe einen Schwarzbriefkasten. Ich sehe einen kleinen Garten. Ich sehe eine hohe Hecke. Ich sehe ein altes Tor. Ich sehe eine kleine Stufe. How did you go? Hopefully okay. We're still using the same endings as before. E for feminine, ES for neuter, and for the masculine, it's the same EN ending that's on the article. Den and einen. That, I think, is pretty easy to remember. Now, of course, there's a detailed explanation and heaps of examples in your textbook, Bausteine 1. Here's a quick summary to check out. And if you want to know more about adjectives, you should watch this video next. Danke fürs Zuschauen. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Auf Wiedersehen und tschüss.
Ha, tschüss.